to do this here. I'm muting you right now, just in case we know that there are dogs, kids hanging around, so we want to make sure that you hear everyone. But please feel free to use the chat for any questions during the entire presentation. We'll have obviously plenty of opportunity for you to ask questions as well. I want to make sure that we answer as many questions and that we make sure that you know what the project is about, get to know us as well. Couple of things though before we get started. Please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat, your name, your organization, your role in there, because this project is really going to have a lot of you interacting with each other. So let's get started right now about who you are, how and potentially also what you want to learn with this project. So I'm realized that I'm putting a lot, and the chat is going to be like blowing up, but that's okay. This project, again, is very much intended to create a network of professionals at the PBCC, HBCC sector. So we're really happy that you guys are joining us, and we're going to get started. So with this, let me share my screen, and I can actually, let me see here, introduce my colleagues, Dr. Nia Heidel and Charles Ansel, who will talk a little bit more about this project.
Good morning, everyone. I can't tell you how excited that we are at Complete College America to start this project with you all. I'm Nia Heidel, and I have the great pleasure at Complete College America to work with our alliance, our strategy team, to build on the relationships we have across the alliance and to work on strategies related to college completion, and then lead some work that we're doing around institutional transformation, which this project will easily fit within that project. And then you'll hear from my colleague, Charles Ansel, in a moment, who leads our policy and data work. And then you've just met Nicholas Hewitt, who is our strategy director, who is the lead for this project and also is responsible for the Southern region. So many of you are in states that are in Nicholas's region. I don't want to make the assumption that everyone knows who CCA is. So I'd just like to tell you a little bit about our organizational ethos and how we kind of operate within this space. So we have a picture of our president, Dr. Yolanda Watson-Spiva, on there, and she has brought a different lens to the work that we do. She has elevated equity as a central part of every operation that we have and every project that we're doing. And I think that's very important because it just tells you how we are walking through this space and what we have prioritized and how we're focused. And this project speaks very clearly to that organizational commitment. The staff experience, we wanted to just show you that we have staff members who have worked at all different types of institutions, 2-year, 4-year, public, private, large, small, rural, urban, as well as working for nonprofits and K-12 school districts. And that's important because we believe that the work that we do is very much influenced by who we are and the experiences that we've had. And so as we are working with you on these different initiatives, we want you to know that we have lived this experience. We're all institutional practitioners. And Dr. Watson-Spiva is a HBCU grad, and most of us on staff have either attended at HBCU or worked at HBCU. So we have the institutional context, I think, that's unique around this space. And then we are known for some of the publications that we've done that have been what we would say are provocative. Like our goal is to challenge the status quo and really to get people to start thinking about what are the barriers that exist for our college completion challenges and how do we address that. So a little bit about our mission. We make no apologies at all for being a bold national advocate. And so what that means for us is that we are here to tell people that we need to disrupt the system. We need to look at what the institutional performance gaps have been and figure out how do we, as in higher education, better serve the students who are coming to us for opportunities of economic and social mobility. And so this is what we're committed to. And we've changed from performance gaps or achievement gaps, equity gaps to achievement gaps to institutional performance gaps, to put the emphasis on the fact that it's the systems that are designed and the way that they are operating that are causing challenges for our students. Now we do this work through our alliance, and we have 48 alliance members. You may have seen on social media. Yesterday we welcomed South Carolina. So for our South Carolina colleagues who are on the call, welcome. And we are really excited that we have this network, because what you'll see with part of this project, the goal is for us to create a network, a platform where you all will have access to resource sharing and collaboration that can make your work a little bit easier, because there are really no new ideas. It's just trying to figure out the best way to execute them in the most efficient way that meets the needs of our students. And so the Alliance provides us the opportunity to be able to capitalize and optimize on the resources that we have. Now, our approach to this work is through a lens of systems change. As I mentioned before, we believe that good practice is good. So policy, practice, and perspective, and how these three things work together. So practice is good. We need to make sure that we're doing things the right way, that have equitable outcomes, that are taking into consideration good data. And we need to look at what are the perspectives that we have that are shaping these practices and the things that we're doing, the situation that we find ourselves in. But then we also know that the way to make these things sustainable is to look at policy, because practices are good as the people who are there. But what we want to do is to solidify these practices into systems that actually are sustainable and stay. So no matter who's there, we have policies, practices, and perspectives that are really going to support a system that provides students with what they need to be successful. Now, CCA last year, we organized the way that we focused on college completion, in the sense that we looked at these 4 different pillars. And with these pillars, they are to represent the way that students really move through higher education, and key points that trigger either success or could become a cause for them to stop out or not ever complete. And the first is around purpose. So are we making sure that as we're having conversations with students, and that when we're onboarding them, that we're clear that the goals that they have and what they want to do align with the careers that they're choosing, their academic programs, how are we engaging adult learners? And so some of these things will be things that we will focus on as a part of this project. And then with momentum, are we making sure that students are making progress? So have we given them credit for prior learning, or how are we doing co-requisite support? Do we have plans that help them to stay on track so that they can see accomplishment and make progress? Then what are the structures that are in place? Academic maps, which is and smart. So 3 of the things that for this project will be fully grounded in the structure pillar, which are academic maps, smart schedules, and stackable certificates. So do we have the structures established in place so that if a student knows where they want to go, understands the career, understands the major, we've given them credit for prior learning, but do we have classes when they can take them? Have we taken our academic programs and figured out ways to have stackable credentials embedded in them? So if a student has to stop out, they have something that they can walk away with, or that they're able to experience social and economic mobility, on the way to their degree. And then finally, what about support? So we have to pay attention to the whole student. It can't just be about what it is that they're learning in the classroom. We need to also be attentive to what do they need? Do they have basic needs as far as daycare or housing and security? And how do all those things really support them accomplishing their goals? And we have categorized our work into 2 big buckets. One is building movements and transforming institutions. So for the building movements part, that is, we have done, I think, a fairly good job of rallying people together across the higher education ecosystem to be able to say, okay, this is a concern that we have, and this is a problem that we know exists, and let's address it. So we see that not most recently, but 2 of the ways that you can see that CCA moved the needle on things were co-requisite support and 15 to finish. So we started a national conversation on both of those. And now they have become embedded into a lot of the work that institutions and systems are doing. And then transforming institutions. So that work is really around how do we get institutions to begin to look at the practices and policies that they have in place and the impact that they have on college completion? And we'll talk a lot about the role of data as it relates to our ability to really create environments that are supportive of students. And lastly, before we kind of get into the specific strategies, I want to just tell you a little bit about how we work. So this will be important as we're engaging with you, because we want you to know, so policy, perspective, and practice are the things that are always influencing how we go through this space. And then we have a 5-step process that really shapes the way we function. So the first thing is identifying the challenges and opportunities. So a lot of this will come with looking at your data and seeing, okay, what are the things that we can see just from your data, the trends that might be opportunities for us to, do something different, or what are the challenges that exist. And then getting a group of people together to say, okay, we've identified these things, but let's look at how we address this concern from all these different perspectives. Then we rally around a shared vision. So creating conditions where people say, okay, I can see a possibility with this. If we do these things and we work together, then we should be able to make good movement. Creating a plan. And so good ideas without a plan is just a good idea, right? So it's not going to help us to get to our ultimate attainment goals. So looking at all these other things that we've identified and say, okay, what do we need to do? How can we do it? Who do we need to be involved in order to get this done? Then we implement it and we look at it to say, okay, we implemented it. Did it work? What do we need to tweak? How do we adjust? Who should we bring to the table to make sure that we're doing the best for the students? So as we're working through this project, these are some of the areas that we're going to be looking at. I mean, this is the process that we're going to be going through as we're identifying the strategies that we're going to work on at your institutions, and also as we build the network across the sector. And I'm going to hand off right now to my colleague, Charles Ansell, to talk a little bit about some of the policy work that will be affiliated with this project.
Thanks. And just really quick, Nia, do you want, okay, great. Who's driving the slides? Just really quick, I don't know if it's you or Nicholas. Oh, thank you. Well, hi, everybody. I'm Charles Ansell, Vice President for Research Policy and Advocacy here at CCA. Prior to this, I worked as the Chief Operating Officer doing policy and data work at the Community Colleges of the System of New Hampshire. But before that, I was at the City Colleges of Chicago for several years, leading student success efforts. And so a special hello to Brandon Nichols, who I used to work with, I think back when you were at Kennedy King, and Daia, who I saw joined, but originally under the name of Brandon Nichols. So I was confused for a second, but I think we're good now. Thank you. What I want to go over, I'm going to go over like just 3 or 4 slides really quickly. And they're going to be a little dense because I wanted to just kind of condense all the things that I want to make sure that we're going over on the data and policy front. But again, this is stuff that I hope that I'm working with you all on in a way that works for your college specifically, because I know everybody's at different places in terms of having the data and the policy capacities to support a lot of the student success strategies that Nia just went through. But essentially, I'm going to go through 2 big areas, right? So one will be data, and I'll kick that part off first. And then the second will be policy, right? And that's going to take on 2 different forms. So one is, how can we act as a network, both within your states as well as all together as a group, to make sure that we advocate for enough financial resources to be able to achieve all the student success initiatives that Nia just walked through. And then also make sure that the policies that are in place at your institution, at your state, whatever makes the most sense for your context, support those practices. So if we can go to the next slide. So there's a little bit going on here, but what I want to do is just kind of give an overview about how we work with data here at Complete College America, and more specifically, how we work with you on working on data and what that even means, right? I'm going to walk through the elements on this slide left to right. So, I think it's fair to say that colleges are in the business of, for lack of a better way of putting it, of making successful alumni, and that success is quantified largely by the metrics in that top row, right? And these are social mobility metrics on the educational and economic value of credentials that students earn. And again, going back to the theme of focusing on the measures here, I include some here. These aren't exhaustive. They include measures like median earnings, percent employed in area of study, transfer from one sector to another. The data sources for these, and there are many, they're not all depicted here, include ones that you'd be, of course, very familiar with: local and federal labor data, data from other tools that capture alumni outcomes, and National Student Clearinghouse information on transfer activity. And so you can see on the spectrum arrow on the left, the level of near-term influence. So, for example, by the time you have these labor, economic, and transfer outcomes, these lagging indicators, you have long ago influenced this by the metrics and the categories that come below, that come next. So next you have graduation counts and rates, the type of stuff colleges send to iPads, but there could also be in this category many measures specific to a college tied to specific local completion goals. And so at CCA, we use a data tool called the Post-Secondary Data Partnership. Doing a little bit of homework before the presentation. I know that many of you are already on this tool, which is great. And for those who aren't, we'll work to get there, because this will be the crux of the data baselining that we're going to want to do, which is really understanding where you're at on a lot of those predictors of college completion. And I'm sure you already produced some of these either in the post-secondary data partnership or in other tools, or both. But this comes into play, these metrics here, by capturing credits to degree and time to degree. It's in that completion lane. But it really comes into play on the measures that predict student graduation, right? Your credit accumulation, term-to-term persistence, gatekeeper math and English pass rates, and the like. So given that we're all working on different initiatives that influence these measures, given that colleges, that you all measure the success of your projects on this project we're about to embark on in this way, we need to be mindful, especially about how our efforts tie to metrics like these, how they relate, so we can assess what we're doing in this project and predict our abilities to influence college attainment rates and to influence the closure of any equity gaps within them. So finally, you have the level that you engage with on the week-to-week, right? And even on the day-to-day, your daily enrollment, your risk flagging based on student advisor interactions and homework assignments being turned in, and other metrics that would be tracked in your student information system, whether that's, Banner or PeopleSoft or Genzavar, or your learning management system, your Blackboard, your Canvas, or in your advising systems, whether that's like an EAB or Civitas or any of those tools. But the idea here is to see how the PDP fits, or really more the metrics and the data that tool represents, which metrics it supports, and how it links to the completion and post-completion indicators that we're working on through this project at the top, how our operations flow from them. So this will be, we'll engage more deeply on this in subsequent conversations, but for now, just feel free to reach out to me with any questions on this piece, as well as looking into the post-secondary data partnership or otherwise producing what's in that tool. So if we go to the next slide. So I did mention that our policy lane, well, it's really, there's multiple lanes, but they really fall into two big ones, and one is really depicted in this slide, which is how we believe the post-secondary sector is really at a point where we need to be balancing funding that comes from the state or from local appropriations. We need to be funding not just accountability, but funding for adequacy. So starting on the left-hand portion of this slide, I've depicted the gap to get from our national post-secondary attainment rates to our national goal. And this is as put forward by the Lumina Foundation. The idea here is to represent the gap that could exist in any of your states, or maybe you also have per college or system-wide graduation or attainment goals. But the idea is that if you've got your own goal that aligns with your community needs and perhaps local or broader economic needs, we need to figure out how much it actually costs to close this gap. We really don't know what that number is, and that sort of research hasn't really been done before. So looking to the right, we know, as Nia just walked through, that there are student success strategies for getting there. We know that there are reforms that work to close those gaps, but which go first, and how much do they cost to run in total? How do they combine across colleges to inform how much money is required by your college to reap the most benefits? We don't know. I've listed the typical funding formulations that states use on the right, whether it's figuring out a new every year, cycling off a prior year's appropriations total, using inputs like enrollment and credits activity, or the best of these options, outputs around student success, or some combination of these most likely. But none of these are really up to the task that I depict on the left here. So if we go to the next slide. So to be clear, right, CCA in the past has advocated outcomes-based funding, which does have a firm advantage of being about student success and about incentivizing the right practices and about promoting the reforms that work, the reforms that close, any attainment gaps and boost student success overall. But we have to acknowledge that recent studies have shown that the results are mixed because as we continue to mature as a sector and how we figure out how to best fund higher education, we know that even these outcomes incentives have limitations. So the idea is, how do we, as colleges, as a network, again, within state or across this entire project, advocate in the policy realm for new funding models? Because there are, like I said, limitations to outcomes-based funding, first not depicted here actually, but if they aren't a large part of the budget, they don't matter. So in other words, if say enrollment is 95% of the formula by which your college gets money and success measures are 5%, then tuition revenue is still by far the bigger driver in the financial incentives for student success. And it doesn't otherwise materialize in appropriations. But also, and more detrimentally, in focusing on only accountability, the conversation tends to stay in status quo preservation and having colleges do more with less and slicing the budgetary pie for efficiency as opposed to also sizing it for sufficiency. So that really leads to the second point, that such a funding model cannot actually link to statewide attainment goals directly or to any goals that you might have for your system or for your college. Nor do they always consider local appropriations or redress inequities, which I try to exemplify on the right in a way that matters for this project. It's important to note that that the vast majority of minority serving institutions are community colleges, and community colleges have, I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but have the least funding by far, going to the students who need the most resources by far, and who typically are leaving K-12 systems that may have perpetuated the same resource inequities that are depicted here. It goes unsaid on this slide, but it's understood that higher education is sometimes, competing with other priorities within a state, but it's always important to remember that the benefit to taxpayers of investing in community colleges, like the ones that you all represent, typically exceed the costs by a factor of like 2.5, right? And closing these gaps to fund for college completion is not only justice, but it's also a practical way to spur economic growth. So it's not exactly a shock that there have been recent pieces proving direct inferential links between strategic state appropriations and college completion rates. And my goal here in presenting this is, it's not directly tethered yet to the work that we do, because that's going to have to come out as we, pursue making this project work at each of your colleges. But the idea is, how do we, come together and also pursue this policy initiative to make sure that we're receiving enough material resources to make the student success agenda flourish. If we go to the next slide, I'm not going to walk through all of this, but the idea here is just to say that there are certain policy angles that influence the ability to pursue the practices and the reforms that Neo walked through on the start. I put a box around the state, city, and institution columns here. These are the types of things that we'll be looking for and working on together in terms of making sure that whether it's at state or city level, again, want to appreciate that everybody has a very, very different context. Some of you are in systems, some are standalone, some are in states with central governance, some have city governments and a lot of local appropriations and policy work. But the idea is to see how these different policy aspects can help influence college completion, making sure that students have strong purpose, making sure that they've got a nice semester by semester structure along a schedule that works for them, that there's strong momentum to completion, and that that's going as quickly as possible, but as responsibly as possible, and that there's lots of guardrails and supports in terms of academic advising support, academic support, financial support. And so what that looks like on an institutional basis or at a state city basis is depicted here at a summary level. But again, we'll walk through, because it really is hard to grasp in a sort of an abstract way. It really gets pretty particular depending on your context. So, I just want to say that I'm very excited to be working on this project with you. I think that this is as important as work gets, at least at the stuff that I'm working on. So very open for outreach at any time. I'll put my email in the chat, and I'll also put my cell. Please call or email anytime, and I really look forward to working with everybody.
Thank you, Charles. So as make sure. So as Nia and Charles mentioned, I think this, we are really excited about this, and I think that why PBCC, I think that it should go without saying, but I think that when we talk about, with our funders, with Lumina, they were really talking about, like, how do we actually meet the threshold of 60% of the population with a college degree. And I think that PBCC is really critical to this. I mean, I think we cannot meet that need or that goal without PBCCs and HBCCs being an integral part of this. And quite honestly, I mean, I think that it's nice to have a goal for Lumina, and I'm not saying, I mean, I don't think that they're on the call right now, but really the purpose of this is for the individual students. I mean, that to me, I think is why we're doing this work. It's not for a lofty, great goal, although that's, cherry on top, but to me, it's really like the impact on the individual students. And we know that, PBCCs and BGCs, are enrolling and educating at least like 10% of all Black students in the community college sector. So it is an amazing impact that you're doing on, for Black students, but for the entire communities as well. So what do we hope to gain? And by the way, I just want to make sure that for all the project leads who have been on this call, who are on this call today, you're probably like, okay, this is like the third or fourth call, and I see the same kind of slides and all the same information. Is there something going to be new in here? Yes. So what we're going to do here is obviously talk about the different goals in a minute, but also go a little bit deeper in terms of the different activities associated with the different goals that we want to undertake as part of this project. So I think that we'll go into details with this in a few minutes. So right now we're talking about 22 institutions that are part of this project. They are all over the country. So we're talking about predominantly in the South, obviously. So we're looking at South Carolina, Georgia, Alabama, Arkansas, Louisiana. No, and that's predominantly here, but also in Michigan, Massachusetts, and Illinois. And I apologize if I missed a state here and there. But the thing is that it is pretty much across the country. And what we really want to do is, like I said at the beginning, really create some type of cohort where you guys can talk amongst yourselves, share the great ideas that and share the best practices that you're already doing. But as we're progressing throughout the project and talking about, the resources and, the learnings and the expertise, to really make sure that it is not operating in silos, that you share each other, that you, use each other as soundboards, as, common experts, and to really, again, benefit your institutions and your students. So you'll see that based on the priorities of your institutions, based on where you are also, and like where you want to start in terms of the different strategies, we're going to create communities of practice as well. So that, if someone's like, hey, I really need help with creating academic maps, or how do I best integrate stackable credentials? So we want to make sure that we actually, create cohorts and communities of practice where you are able to not only share resources, and we'll obviously be there to share resources, connect you with content experts throughout the way, but also so that you can actually communicate with each other and, independent of us. I mean, we'll provide you with a great tool so you'll be able to actually share resources, handouts, best practices, communicate as well with this. And that is a learning management system. So early in the spring, we're about to create a course. We call it a course, but basically a format where we're going to be able to upload a bunch of resources associated with different strategies that we're going to talk about, as well as provide, again, some type of discussion board where you're able to actually share and connect with each other around the different strategies and resources as well. So you are here right now. So for those of you who are new from the institutional team, there's a reason you are on this call. It's not just because that this work cannot be done by one person alone. That is definitely the case. But what we want to make sure is that as we embark on this project, that we include as many people as possible. That to change the culture, especially when we talk about democratizing the data and changing the different approaches to different strategies, we want to make sure that there are as many people on the call to and to affect change on campus. So the project lead is the person who probably is the one who invited you to this meeting. So the project lead is the one who's really going to be communicating with CCA, making sure that the work is getting done, that they convene the team, and also we'll be inviting you to not just convene team to do the work at the institutional level, but also we're going to have different convenings throughout the project where we're going to bring the institutional teams together, hopefully, knocking on wood, face to face, so that you can actually have an opportunity to work as small groups across institutions, and so on and so forth. So the project lead really is the person who is going to be communicating with us, but the person also, the team who's really going to counsels, plan, and implement the different strategies are part of the institutional team. So we're really looking at for folks to be from the academic advising. Academic advisors are pretty much central to all of our different strategies. They're the ones who deal with students face to face, pretty much on a daily basis. They're the ones who have like a really good pulse on the students, what they need, and are able to obviously also communicate what's happening at the institutional level to the institution, so to the students rather. So we want to make sure the academic advisors are present and are at the table from the get-go. Student services, again, we're talking about basic needs as part of this process and this project. So how do we actually make sure that student affairs and student services are available, and again are able to provide, like, this is what we need, this is what we hear from the students, and this is how we can provide and implement these particular strategies. Enrollment management, obviously we want to make sure that the students are able to register, and enrollment management, I can see it as a big umbrella, not just in terms of the registrar's office, but also including admissions, including in some cases like orientation, financial aid, and student accounts rather. So how do we actually make sure that those folks are also involved in this? Because I think too often, if we're talking about, as Charles mentioned, like the financial aspect of it, financial aid needs to be at the table to actually understand, and same thing with the bursar office, need to be at the table to see what's happening on the campus, what are we trying to do, and how do we actually align those different offices and those processes to make sure that there are no additional roadblocks to the students. Academic affairs, of course, faculty members. So you play a great role in all of this. Like, what we don't want to do, obviously, is do all of this great work and faculty are the last to know. So we want to make sure that folks at the faculty level are also involved, and not just last to know, but again, part of the process, part to inform how we go about it, and how this, in your particular position and role, can help move the needle towards greater success. And institutional research. I mean, I think that I think everything is going to be involving data. I mean, like, data is going to be pretty much central to this work at the get-go, from the beginning, but throughout as well. Charles talked about data capacity and whether it's PDP or iPads, and I think that IR and IR professionals are really going to be at the central, central to this effort as well. So we want to make sure that they are at the table, that they also we use their expertise and their knowledge to assess how well we're doing as we're progressing throughout this project as well. And we realize that as we go through, as you're actually implementing different strategies, that we may need to bring other folks. So career services, for example, may need to be brought in, especially if we're talking about career maps and so on and so forth. So obviously, that does not preclude that other institutions, other offices and other departments are not included in this. So those are the four main goals that we talked about. Obviously, policy is going to be involved in this, and Charles has mentioned it a little bit earlier. But these are the four main goals that we talked about. The identify pathways, so really talking about what are the academic maps or degree plans. So obviously there are a lot of different nomenclatures associated with pathways. So how do we actually support the institutions to develop them that are student friendly and that actually meet the needs of our students, that embed stackable credentials? That's something that we want to emphasize a little bit more, especially when we talk about the value of higher education. We recognize that not all students are able to pursue an associate's degree. So how do we basically scaffold the student experience so that they can actually get credentials of value as they go through that are marketable, and that they can become lifelong learner and come back to your institution, get an additional stackable credential that ultimately culminate to an associate's degree, and potentially also to a 4-year degree if they so desire. So some of the activities, and you'll see on these slides when we're talking about the different activities, it'll be us, like what do we do, but as in us, as in CCA. But this is something that I want to make sure that it's clear. We're going to provide you with resources. We're going to provide you with content experts, like connecting with content experts, resources, expertise, resources as well. And we're also going to make sure that that work is being done throughout the project. So it's not simply us giving you all those resources and say, good luck, we'll meet you in 2 years. We want to make sure that we provide you the resources and the support to implement these particular strategies and these approaches. So we're talking about academic maps here. So as early, and you'll see in later slides, as early as spring, we will be starting different workshops and different webinars around different strategies so that you can learn a little bit more about how we talk about the different strategies. So we can talk about what are the best practices, share how some of the strategies that we're talking about are being implemented at the 2-year side and how they can best support our students. And we also want to know from you as well, like at my institution, this is how we implement maps, for example, or stackable credentials. So this is not just CCA coming in and telling you this is how we are actually implementing these strategies. You should just be a copy, and paste aspect of it. We want to make sure that we recognize your context of your institution and how we best customize those particular strategies to be much more relevant for your institutions. So a lot of workshops, you're going to see that, a lot of resources throughout. But again, these particular workshop strategies and webinars on strategies will start this spring. The second goal is around different strategies, not so much around the pathways, but very much around the bundle support. So we recognize that, especially as we're focusing on adult learners, they have different lives. So we need to talk about transportation, childcare, internet, Wi-Fi access, and so much more, like food insecurity and housing as well. So how do we best support our students, outside the classroom, so that once they come into the classroom, they are ready, they have the tools they need to be successful. OER, open educational resources could be another aspect that we talk about. So we really want to make sure that we talk about those types of bundle supports. And this is where I think like student services and student affairs are critical, because they deal with this like on a daily basis. We want to make sure that we hear what they have to say, and that they contribute to the implementation of these strategies on your campus. Same thing. I think those are very much like the first two goals are very much aligned with our different strategies. So there's going to be a lot of workshops, a lot of connection with content experts, connecting with resources that we have collected over the years across our alliance, and again, connection between practitioners across the institution as well, that participating in this project, so that you guys can learn from each other. Because we know, we know that stackable credential, a lot of your institutions are doing it already and doing it very well. So how can we learn from each other and make sure that different institutions are benefiting from your prior experience? So again, as Nia said, we're not trying to reinvent the wheel here. Like, a lot of folks are doing great work already in your sector. How do we learn from that and elevate that work as well?
So on data,
yes, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. So, I think our number one thing, right, is to be as much of a service provider here as possible, right? And I know that every college is going to be in a very different place, right? Depending on where you're at, what tools you have, what sort of work you've already done around this, what your staffing looks like. But so that said, I know everybody, of course, has, your mission statement, your strategic plan. You probably already have plenty of metrics that are associated with that. Whatever that, we can do to make sure that the measures that are tied to the type of reform efforts that we've discussed here, if you can almost picture a Venn diagram of like those measures with the measures that you care about in your strategic plan, finding a way to make sure that we work together to identify or following your lead, of course, the measures that are most critical for your college, then the hunting down all the data sources that can feed them and what resources we can bring to bear on that front. And then honestly, most importantly, in the part that I think that can sometimes get shortchanged, is making sure that the right people are having the right conversations on the right data at the right time. So it's not just like information overload or data for data's sake, but truly allows for strong management around this work, so you can be doing as much as you can for student success, right? And so that will include a lot of work, with myself, with the CCA team, with each other, potentially with data experts from across our alliance. But please be aware, like this is a setup move on my part a little bit, because I hope to be doing individual outreach shortly to get an idea of where you're at with data. And thank you, Nicholas, because what that's going to ultimately look like is being able to understand what your data landscape is, and then from there, knowing essentially what your student success landscape is, right? Based on quantitative information on the types of metrics that I went through earlier that are predictors of college completion, be that retention or credit accumulation or things like that, and how you're making that data available, and how we can work with you to make sure that there's strong adherence and relentless attention to the results that you want to see for the metrics that matter most to you. And again, as overlapping with the initiatives that are part of this project. So expect something soon in terms of outreach to at least just get to that current state data analysis. And please, I'm gonna be here obviously for the rest of this meeting and over email and cell. I've put all that in the chat. You can also chat me directly now if you prefer, but we'll be connecting shortly, and I really look forward to it.
All right, so we'll talk about the last goal that we have here. And then I think, to me, this is one of the most exciting ones, and it is to build the HBCC PBCC network. And so when Luna asked us to work on this project, one of the things that they were very cognizant of is the fact that this sector across higher education has a really huge impact and reach to students of color. However, the sector is not often elevated in a way where people people across the ecosystem, like the entire higher education ecosystem, are able to see the contributions that are being made. And so Lumina wanted us to work with the group, with the cohorts, to be able to create a network of sharing across the sector. So not only for the 22 institutions that are participating, but for all institutions who would have this designation, to be able to share and resources and collaborate, and then also provide opportunities to elevate the work that is being done. So the things that you all are doing that are fabulous, that we find a way to be able to market those better and share those across the broader higher education community. So I think that's going to be really exciting, because as I've been talking to a number of you all, some of you are already doing some of the strategies that we have outlined. And so within the cohort, we already have institutions who are exemplars. And that's going to be great for us to be able to share with other institutions. And so taking those learnings and being able to do that. So two other parts of that is to identify content experts who are currently working in this sector, to be able to help CCA and other organizations to be able to do this work in other places. So for instance, we have convenings and meetings all across the country around the different strategies. And when we're doing that, so if we're having a meeting for stackable credentials in Nevada, then we will bring content experts with us to say, okay, you work with this team, we'll work with this team, and we work together to assist the other institutions in doing their work. So right now, we want to be able to identify individuals, professionals from PBCCs and HBCCs who could be these content experts that are being deployed across the nation to do this work. So establishing that cohort is going to be important. And then the last thing is that we have funding from another foundation to create a leadership development program. And so this program is really focused on identifying mid-level professionals who aspire to be executive level professionals in the PBCC HBC space. So we will ask your institutions to nominate someone to participate in this leadership development program, where we will bring in people who are really like superstars across higher education in the 4-year and 2-year space across all different disciplines and areas, to work with them and serve as mentors and provide training and professional development to hopefully position them to be able to really actualize their aspirations to be executive levels in this space. So the activities that are associated with this are creating a communities of practice. So we have a learning management system that you all will have access to in shortly. And in the learning management system, you'll be able to share resources and be able to collaborate. And then we will organize a little bit. We'll have cohorts built around states and regions, because we realize that sometimes there's some nuances across a state or in a region that are specific. And I've already said these other things. So this goal is really going to be with us working with you all to identify people and things that you need. And I say the last thing in summary, because I know that this has been a lot of information over the last 50 minutes, is that this project is not intended to be us coming in telling you everything that you need to do. There's some things that we know are important, like data is important. If we don't have good data, if we don't have a way to disaggregate the data, if we don't have a way to democratize the data and share it, then much of the efforts that we do are going to be, in vain. So that's something that's kind of a standard. But we understand that there are going to be nuances at different institutions, and that we'll have to adjust. And so part of this is going to be the conversations that we have with the teams to say, okay, tell us what you need, tell us what you're experiencing, tell us what the climate is, and what does your community have the capacity to do, so that we can develop a project that will move the needle in the ways that you need them to be moved. And so the way that our milestones, this is a fairly quick project from our perspective, in the sense that it goes through June of 2023. So we have quite a bit to do in the next 18 months. And this semester, the rest of the semester, what we're trying to do or focus on is figuring out exactly what it is that you all need, where you are, what are you seeing as your biggest challenges, and then starting to have a good sense of your data your data capacity and what's going on with your data, so we can position you to be able to really actively participate in the workshops that we're going to start having in the spring. And then getting you on the systems, and then identifying content experts who can work with you on the specific things that you need, whether that's academic maps or stackable credentials or basic needs, and just getting those things moving. And I do want to clarify one thing when we talk about institutional teams. When we were talking about the teams, there are lots of different voices that we think are important in the conversation. The team itself is really only about 5 people, but you want to make sure that the people that you select to be in those leadership roles have knowledge of these different areas and have the ability to move people who are being touched by these different areas. Because what these projects, the way that we have seen them be most beneficial to the institutions is that if you have someone who has both experience and perspective, but then also a little, I would say, like social capital on campus, and is able to get rally people around the work that we're doing. And then lastly, if you are new to CCA and you don't have a profile yet, then we would love for you to go ahead and create a profile, because it is beneficial in a sense that a lot of the stuff that we have is open access, but it's open access once you get your profile. So you just make your profile, and then all the stuff will pop up. And the platform is a little intuitive, so as you can say what you're looking for, and it'll help you navigate those things. So that was a lot of stuff. We want to have the rest of the time open for questions and answers, so that we can make sure that that you leave today with a clear, that we've just answered questions and things are not really ambiguous, as best as we can.
Yeah, just one quick thing before we're able to a question, and please feel free to unmute yourself or use the chat for to ask questions. One thing that we all come from institutions before coming to CCA. So a lot of the workshops that we're going to schedule right now. So right now we are looking at your calendars. When is your first day of class? When is your spring break and things like that? Homecoming and all that stuff. So we want to make sure that we're not scheduling when you're the busiest. So we recognize that the first week of January is probably late, or at least the first 2 weeks at least. It's probably not the best time to hold a workshop because you guys are crazy busy. So we want to make sure that we, as we're scheduling those things, we're definitely going to take that into consideration, because we recognize, again, the context in which you operate. So also about the institutional team, while that person may not be used in the implementation aspect of it, having a student voice. I know that we do have student affairs and academic advising, but sometimes having an actual student is quite useful to have in those types of meetings, because we want to make sure that again, we're doing this for the benefit of our students. So having their voices, making sure that also the communication trickles down to the students. Like, this is what my institution, this is what we are doing for you, as opposed to simply having it kind of expect somehow that the students just know, just by themselves, that what are some of the strategies and some of the outreach we do. Which, let's face it, a lot of times colleges do a very poor job of communicating to students what we're actually doing for their benefit. So that's something that can help as well, to include a student as a consultant, if you will, in the implementation team. So with this, I will stop, and it will open the floor and the chat for any questions that you may have for this.
Hello, Nicholas. This is Richard Moss from UA Plastic Tech. I put a question in the chat, but I want to be clear that there are quote unquote 5 institutional team areas, and they're academic advising, student services, enrollment management, academic affairs, and IR. And we should look for quote unquote leads to lead each of those areas. Not necessarily be content experts, but lead those areas. Am I correct?
Yes.
and we'll provide support in these areas. So as Nia said, like ideally folks who would be representatives. So again, we recognize that roles and titles are you know, every institution has different roles and things like that. But someone who is able to inform and in some cases impact these particular areas, because a lot of the strategies that we're going to be talking about relate specifically to these areas.
And the question about financial aid, so the person who is representing enrollment management, my thought would be that they would have a perspective on financial aid. So it's not that you have a person from all these areas, but someone who's familiar with it and will bring that frame of reference when we're having conversations and making plans. So it's really, to break it down, like, I think the easiest way is when we're going through this, the thing that we are trying to avoid is that we look at, we say, all right, we want to work on academic advising, hypothetically. And we have a group of people and we're talking about academic advising. And then somebody realizes later on, wait, we didn't have anybody from the actual faculty engaged in this conversation. Right. And so we've made all these different ideas and come up with some good plans. And then a key stakeholder in that area has not been included. So just trying to figure out, when you look at your institutional composition, do you have people who you're picking on the team who would be able to at least engage that area with a conversation and bring their perspective in? Or are they rooted in that, like situated in that area that they can speak for that group? So that's really what we're trying to make sure. So some of this stuff will happen in working groups outside of this committee. So Chancellor Singleton, can you explain, just elaborate on your question for me? Because I want to make sure I'm answering your question correctly.
If I understand, yes, I'm sorry, thank you. If I understand correctly, we're talking about bringing maybe 4, 5, 6 different people per institution to come together to have a conversation. That gets to be a pretty daunting task when you're talking about the different areas. And in my institution, that makes it a little bit easier because some of these are, I have experts in one area that would cover one or two, but it's something like financial aid obviously is far, separate than some of the other areas, but we're talking about advising, academic affairs, and some of the other areas. I just think that once managing that becomes an issue where we start to have separate conversations, but there's almost no way to bring everything back towards comprehensive, and we're making changes or thoughts or moves based on several different perspectives of large groups of people. That's just what I was thinking.
Yeah, so that's a fair point. So when I was on a college campus and I led a project like this, the way we kind of mitigated against this is we had a team of 5 people. And then as we would discuss things, so like I represented the faculty. So whenever we would discuss these things as related to that faculty might have an interest in, then I was on the agenda for the faculty General Assembly meeting. Or I would send a note to the chairs of the different departments and say, this is what this committee is working on. But literally I was an agenda item on every single faculty meeting just to give them an update. And that allowed them to, first of all, always know what we were working on. So there could never be a question that they weren't informed. And the other thing was, it gave them an opportunity to ask questions. So it was just like an update, and I literally would speak for 3 minutes, but people would reach me afterwards and say, okay, I want to learn more about this. And so I think that's really the piece of, it's about transparency. And we could work through, because I understand this could be complex, so some of you also have multiple campuses. And so that's when I was saying that it's not going to be the same thing for everybody. But since we've all worked, the CCA people have all worked on college campuses, we completely, we live this, right? And so we just need to figure out what's going to work for you. And to that point, the other thing is we have timelines that look good, for us. and with our grant deliverables and all these different things. If you're on a campus, we're working on another project, and it's a data project, and then they have one person on campus who does IR. That's it, one person went on emergency medical leave. They have no idea when this person's coming back. It looks like they're going to be gone for a year. They can't continue our data project. You know, it's important, but there's no way they can do it. So we are just postponing all of their stuff until they replace the data person. And we communicated with the funder. This institution has an extraordinary circumstance. We're going to need an extension for them. And so we just need to know what's going on your campuses and what you need, and we can adjust, you know.
I do appreciate you saying that, because I am in my institution, we're definitely multi-campus. We have 6 different campuses. And so we're always looking to speak from the same book or be on the same page. It's always difficult, especially when you're having a conversation. But I gather, internally, you tend to get it right because you know who leads what. But when we're having a conversation nationally, like you all are providing this opportunity, and I think this is just awesome to see other PBCCs and HBCCs. That is just an awesome thing to me. I need to speak with some of those other folks. I need to hear the conversation, but if at this level, some of us at any given point, for example, I think for the first hour of this meeting, I was on 2 Zooms at one time. How do we, and I appreciate the recordings because I will be looking at all of these moving back, but staying engaged and keeping that perspective could be difficult given the different departments of each institutions. I saw the community colleges of Chicago, they're accredited each campus. That's different from what we have. We have one accreditation, so it looks different. So I really need to hear their perspective and have that dialogue, because I think that's when we benefit from it.
All right, see you, Andy.
So I was just throwing that out, and I just thought it would be a conversation. And again, I love what we're doing. This is a great opportunity, and I wouldn't miss it for the world. This is the networking that I believe that I've been missing, should I say, over the past couple of years due to the pandemic, and even before then, it was just too difficult to get like institutions together. So I'm glad you're doing this.
And I appreciate your comments. And I think you're doing exactly what we need, is telling us the areas that we need to focus on. So the idea that, so like connecting you with City Colleges of Chicago and the accreditation process, like that's something that we can elevate. I'm sorry, my dog is acting up, and so I apologize. So that's exactly what we need to know, so that now that may have not been on our list. It wasn't on our list before, but now that we know that that's something that would be critical, we can add it to the list, because that helps us build a network, which is one of our goals. So I would say that, so as these ideas come, and all of our emails will be in the chat, just send us these ideas. And as we're building out this program, we can know different things that we need to kind of add to the docket. And when it comes to getting together, we're still trying to figure out, quite honestly, what's the best strategy going to be for getting people together, because you're all over the country. And some of you have multiple campuses, which may require you have more than 4 people on the team because of the way things are working out. And so we have to balance like the need, the practicality, and the cost, right? And that's why we're looking at maybe some things will be regionally based. And so that because it might make it more cost effective if we do things across the state, then sometimes it might be more effective if we have things related to like a community of practice. So if we're looking at accreditation issues or whatever that is, it might make more sense for your campus to be with another one. So we're still trying to figure those things out. And as we work through it, we'll come up with something that I think is most beneficial.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? So not to stop this conversation. Like every good meeting has a good homework at the end of this. Or if it's not, well, I'm just made it up. So there it is. So we will be. So there are a couple of things. So expect an email from me. Probably later tonight or later today or on Monday at the very latest. That will include the PowerPoint. That will include a link to the video of this recording. But I would also include a 2-page document, and that's their homework, that basically tells us a little bit more about your institution. That also tells us a little bit more about, who your team, institutional team is and will be. Because what we want to do, again, as part of the communities of practice in our LMS, is can we bring all of the IR folks together in one discussion group, basically, and all the folks who are over advising together, and so on and so forth. So that sheet will ask for this. We'll ask a little bit more around what are your students struggling with, like internally and externally. What are the issues that we need to address a little bit more moving forward? And this is where, again, like the cohorting will work, especially for external factors. So as say 5 or 6 institutions are having the same issues, let's make sure we bring them together and create a brain trust, basically, as to how do we actually handle these things, how do we best support our students moving forward. So this is intake. I don't really care for the word, but that's pretty much what the purpose is. We want to know a little bit more about you. What are your priorities? What are your areas of growth, but also areas of expertise. I think that we want to know, like, we recognize that you guys are doing great work already. So how do we identify, the exemplar institutions to, pick content experts to lead specific discussions in the network that we are creating this among those institutions. So expect that. It is short. I don't want you to think that it's a, this is not another dissertation that we're asking you to complete. It is a fairly short document, but again, I think it's important for us to learn a little bit more and see where you're at and what you want to focus on specifically moving forward.
And in closing, I just want to say thank you very much. I know that, time is like the only unrenewable resource that we have. So I appreciate that you all gave us this time today. We are looking forward to this. Our goal at CCA is to implement things, work with you to develop things that's going to make things better for you and your students. Like that, ultimately, at the end of the day, that's what we're trying to accomplish. So we're very happy for this partnership. If there's anything that we can do, y'all let us know. And we hope that you all have a fabulous weekend. We'll hang on for a second in case anybody has a question and needs to stay.